Hi, my name is Michael Ducey. I'm a sociologist. Recently, I had the opportunity to see two short videos that raised my hopes that what Buddhists call sanity could be much more widely distributed than it is now, including to financial and political elites. The first video is called God is in the Neurons, and it was written by the internet gaming personality who goes by the name Athene. And the other one is the video of the 2008 TED lecture by the neuroscientist Jill Bolte Taylor. Now, the sanity that we're talking about here is a complete awareness of how things actually are. So, it includes transitoriness. Now, my favorite description of transitoriness is from Shunryu Suzuki Roshi. When you realize that everything is just a flashing into the vast universe, then you become very strong and your existence becomes very meaningful. The key term here is realization. And a realization is very different from a mere idea or concept. And this distinction's been floating around in literature for a long time. I forget who it was who first gave us the distinction between notional assent and real assent. Notional assent is what Brazilians have to the quality of snow. I've never seen it, never felt it, but they've heard about it and says, they say, oh yeah, I know what snow is. Then a Brazilian can travel to Minnesota and spend a weekend in a winter blizzard, and then they would say, oh yeah, right, now I get what snow is. Now, you'd have to maybe read through a lot of literature in order to know what the sages mean when they use the term realization. But now that we have the recent discoveries of neuroscience to help us out, we can describe that difference very succinctly. The idea of transitoriness is a product of the left hemisphere of the brain. And as such, it more or less scares people, depresses them, makes them feel sad, sometimes even suicidal. But the realization of transitoriness is an experience in the right hemisphere of the brain. And it is an experience of connection with everything. And so it infinitely expands one's sense of identity.
I am an energy being connected to the energy all around me through the consciousness of my right hemisphere.
Now, let us be candid about the fact that this kind of big picture sanity is not distributed very widely in human society. Human behavior is much more dominated by profound and irrational fear than it is by sanity. And this kind of fear turns human beings into rigid, predatory, and violent actors on the stage of history. Now, to a Western American audience, the primary example of such insanity would be the Taliban and Al-Qaeda of the Middle East. But I respectfully submit that they are not the leading practitioners of insanity. In their place, I would nominate Wall Street. Every day we hear reports of predatory economic practices and the efforts of government agencies to control them. But as the old saying goes, you cannot legislate morality. And so the control of predatory practices by the rich can only take place by a social process, the spread of a culturally more advanced vision of life than irrational fear. So, The paradox of sanity is that even though it is a highly desirable experience and completely fulfilling, then you become very strong and your existence becomes very meaningful. It is also far from a routine occurrence. The reason for this seems to be a preoccupation with the demands of physical survival. And this for a species that started out as prey itself and still finds it difficult to escape from the atavistic fear of being hunted. And this preoccupation lives in the left hemisphere of the brain. However, we now live in a world where there is so much wealth and so much knowledge that if there ever was a time and place when Homo sapiens could transcend its primitive history, it should be now, and it should be here in New York City. Now, as far as knowledge is concerned, recent Western science has added important details to the 2,500-year-old discoveries of Gautama. And these discoveries make the wider distribution of sanity a greater possibility than ever before. The breakthroughs that I am thinking of are, first, simply the discovery of the functions of the right hemisphere of the brain, and secondly, the recognition that all human emotions are fundamentally neurological. So the right hemisphere of the brain has intimate access to all sensory activity going on in the human body. And so it is the part of our anatomy that can actually repair those broken neurons that are the foundation of irrational fear.
Our beliefs have a profound impact on our body chemistry.
And as I said, these two discoveries first off explain what Gautama was doing 2,500 years ago when he told us to cease the chatter of the mind and just sit. Ceasing the chatter of the mind is suspending the activity of the left hemisphere of the brain. And just sitting means to engage the activity of the right hemisphere of the brain. Engage in sensory awareness. This is what modern Western scientific trauma treatment methods call using the felt sense. And furthermore, adding this degree of clarity and precision to the situation makes it possible to access more easily and completely the information stored in the right hemisphere of the brain. So now let's turn to the overall description of the human brain by Jill Bolte Taylor.
If you've ever seen a human brain, it's obvious that the two hemispheres are completely separate from one another. And I have brought for you a real human brain. Thank you. So this is a real human brain. This is the front of the brain, the back of the brain with the spinal cord hanging down. And this is how it would be positioned inside of my head. And when you look at the brain, it's obvious that the two cerebral cortices are completely separate from one another. For those of you who understand computers, our right hemisphere functions like a parallel processor, while our left hemisphere functions like a serial processor. The two hemispheres do communicate with one another through the corpus callosum, which is made up of some 300 million axonal fibers. But other than that, the two hemispheres are completely separate. Because they process information differently, each of our hemispheres think about different things, they care about different things, and dare I say, they have very different personalities. Excuse me. Thank you. It's been a joy. Our right human hemisphere is all about this present moment. It's all about right here, right now. Our right hemisphere, it thinks in pictures, and it learns kinesthetically through the movement of our bodies. Information in the form of energy streams in simultaneously through all of our sensory systems, and then it explodes into this enormous collage of what this present moment looks like, what this present moment smells like and tastes like, what it feels like, and what it sounds like. I am an energy being connected to the energy all around me through the consciousness of my right hemisphere. We are energy beings connected to one another through the consciousness of our right hemispheres as one human family. And right here, right now, we are brothers and sisters on this planet, here to make the world a better place. And in this moment, we are perfect, we are whole, and we are beautiful. My left hemisphere, our left hemisphere, is a very different place. Our left hemisphere thinks linearly and methodically. Our left hemisphere is all about the past, and it's all about the future. Our left hemisphere is designed to take that enormous collage of the present moment and start picking out details, and more details about those details. It then categorizes and organizes all that information, associates it with everything in the past we've ever learned, and projects into the future all of our possibilities. And our left hemisphere thinks in language. It's that ongoing brain chatter that connects me and my internal world to my external world. It's that little voice that says to me, hey, you got to remember to pick up bananas on your way home. I need them in the morning. It's that calculating intelligence that reminds me when I have to do my laundry. But perhaps most important, it's that little voice that says to me, I am. I am. And as soon as my left hemisphere says to me, I am, I become separate. I become a single, solid individual, separate from the energy flow around me and separate from you.
And here is Athene's view.
The left cerebral hemisphere is largely responsible for creating a coherent belief system in order to maintain a sense of continuity towards our lives. New experiences get folded into the pre-existing belief system. When they don't fit, they are simply denied. Counterbalancing this is the right cerebral hemisphere, which has the opposite tendency. Whereas the left hemisphere tries to preserve the model, the right hemisphere is constantly challenging the status quo. When the discrepant anomalies become too large, the right hemisphere forces a revision in our worldview. However, when our beliefs are too strong, the right hemisphere may not succeed in overriding our denial.
Now, once we recognize that all human emotional issues are neurological issues, we have the two tools we need to seriously reduce the influence of irrational fear in our lives.
The human brain is a network of approximately 100 billion neurons. Different experiences create different neural connections which bring about different emotions. And depending on which neurons get stimulated, certain connections become stronger and more efficient, while others may become weaker. This is what's called neuroplasticity. Someone who trains to be a musician will create stronger neural connections that link the two hemispheres of the brain in order to be musically creative. Virtually any sort of talent or skill can be created through training. Rudiger Gann, who was a self-admitted hopeless student, used to fail at basic math and went on to train his abilities and became a famous human calculator, capable of performing extremely complex mathematics. Rationality and emotional resilience work the same way. These are neural connections that can be strengthened. Whatever you are doing at any time, you are physically modifying your brain to become better at it. Since this is such a foundational mechanism of the brain, being self-aware can greatly enrich our life experience.
We also know from modern psychology that traumatization is a nearly universal childhood experience. And so we also understand that our nervous system is full of damaged neural connections. These damaged neurons are then the foundation of all atavistic and irrational fear in our lives.
Specific neurons and neurotransmitters, such as norepinephrine, trigger a defensive state when we feel that our thoughts have to be protected from the influence of others. If we are then confronted with differences in opinion, the chemicals that are released in the brain are the same ones that try to ensure our survival in dangerous situations. In this defensive state, the more primitive part of the brain interferes with rational thinking, and the limbic system can knock out most of our working memory, physically causing narrow-mindedness. We see this in the politics of fear, in the strategy of poker players, or simply when someone is stubborn in a discussion. No matter how valuable an idea is, the brain has trouble processing it when it is in such a state. On a neural level, it reacts as if we're being threatened, even if this threat comes from harmless opinions or facts that we may otherwise find helpful and could rationally agree with.
These fears put a person into a habitual defensive state. And in that state, he easily lies, steals, kills, rationalizes, denies, destroys, and justifies it all as necessary for survival.
When we are not being self-aware, most of our thoughts and actions are impulsive. And the idea that we are randomly reacting and not making conscious choices is instinctively frustrating. The brain resolves this by creating explanations for our behavior and physically rewriting it into our memories through memory reconsolidation, making us believe that we were in control of our actions. This is also called backward rationalization, and it can leave most of our negative emotions unresolved and ready to be triggered at any time. They become a constant fuel to our confusion, as our brain will keep trying to justify why we behaved irrationally.
However, going back to the work on the hemispheres, we know that the right hemisphere of the brain is the control center for all sensory activities in the body. And so it can, and regularly does, repair damaged neurons. All successful personal change in psychotherapy and all resolution of personal anxieties experienced in meditation are neurological events. As we will see in the upcoming clip, Dr. Taylor thinks it is easy to step into the consciousness of the right hemisphere of the brain. But she did so by having a blood clot disable the left hemisphere of her brain.
So, who are we? We are the life force power of the universe with manual dexterity and two cognitive minds. And we have the power to choose moment by moment who and how we want to be in the world. Right here, right now, I can step into the consciousness of my right hemisphere where I am the life force power of the universe. I am the life force power of the 50 trillion beautiful molecular geniuses that make up my form, at one with all that is. Or I can choose to step into the consciousness of my left hemisphere, where I become a single individual, a solid, separate from the flow, separate from you. I am Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor, intellectual, neuroanatomist. These are the we inside of me. Which would you choose? Which do you choose? And when? I believe that the more time we spend choosing to run the deep inner peace circuitry of our right hemispheres, the more peace we will project into the world, and the more peaceful our planet will be. And I thought that was an idea worth spreading. Thank you.
Even though her claim that it is easy is incorrect, the methods of Buddha and contemporary trauma treatment are readily available for our use. And the added knowledge that neuroscience has provided certainly makes the right hemisphere more accessible than it has ever been before. Taylor obviously neglects the ferocious forces of habit, social pressure, that prevent the left hemisphere from being open to more complete communication with the right hemisphere of the brain. And we must note that trauma imprints live in the left hemisphere, and so any introspective process has to engage them. That is why meditation takes effort and deliberate focus. But practitioners have cultivated this art of interior communication for thousands of years, and the tools are found everywhere. They are all variants of the basic instruction: shut up and listen to yourself. Of course, full access to both hemispheres is the heart and soul of any sanity project. That is what enables us to engage only in rational fears, to make rational choices, and not take refuge from our anxieties in excessive wealth or thoughtless exercises of power. That's it. That's my presentation for today. There is more material on these issues on my blog at timegeist.tumblr.com. Thanks very much.